Welcome. I'm not going to do a trigger warning about explicit language because that's what the talk is about. And if you came, it's because you saw that title and you're interested in learning more about it. Plus, I suspect that some people are feeling the need to have a little bit of explicit language. So I'm going to give you some things to think about. So there was recently an episode, some of you probably saw it. I'm not going anywhere. There it is. On a bunch of different news programs, a couple of Russian warships pulled up to this island, Zmini Ostriv, Ostriv Zmini, the Serpent Island or Snake Island in the Black Sea, and they demanded that the soldiers lay down their weapons, and there was a little conversation, and then they basically told them to go fuck themselves. And no, come on. I don't want to do this. Thank you. Great. So I'm just going to play it. It's just this long. I hope we got sound. Let's see. Yeah, there it is. Stop there. Right. And that's the end of it. And so they're speaking Russian. He says, "Ruski военный корабль, иди нахуй." And you hear them have a little conversation first among themselves, like, okay, what should I tell him? And the guy says, should I tell him to fuck off? And he says, and somebody else says, yeah, на всякий случай, like, just in case. And so he does it. And that expression, which is a very common expression, but it's also very productive, it's used in a lot of different contexts, you can translate it in different ways, but everybody's chosen to translate it, at least in this, and when you look online, you see it at The Guardian and other news sites as go fuck yourself, right? Or fuck off, I think, sometimes. And so almost at the same time, let's go back to my slide. Where is it? I love technology. There it is. So almost at the same time, this sign appeared online. It's apparently a road sign. One of my students yesterday, I showed it to him, and he said, "I'm sure that's photoshopped." So I don't know. If you look really carefully, maybe it is photoshopped. That doesn't detract from its effect. I think that it's created for a particular purpose. We're going to talk about what that purpose is, because in order to translate it, you kind of have to decide what's it supposed to be doing there. And so in order to figure out, and I'm going to tell you what this means, I can give you we're going to talk about how to translate it, right? So if you don't read those letters, you'll know in a second. So first let me talk a little bit about a couple of approaches. First of all, you have to interpret this thing. And you have to look at the words and say, okay, these are what the words mean. And if you looked up each individual word, you'd say iди, go, na, to or on to, and hui, which means dick or penis. Usually it's derogatory, right? It's vulgar, so it's not penis. It's more like prick or dick or cock. And so you've interpreted it, but that's not a good interpretation. Go on cock. No, it doesn't, right? That's not a good translation. I understand what that means. It's in my head now. I kind of see what it could mean. How would we say that in English? Not sure yet. You got to think about the context. Now, if you think about the context between these two scenarios that I just gave you, they're different. One is a response to a request or an order, which the import is basically no, right? And this is a set of road signs. They're telling you where to go, how to go. If you want to go forward, you go this way. You want to go left, you want to go right. And so it's a slightly different context, and it's also a different genre. So this is one of the things about translation. If you're translating from Chinese into English and it happens to be recipes, you're not translating Chinese, you're translating recipes, right? They should feel like recipes in English. And this needs to feel like a road sign if you want to do a good job as a translator, right? If you want to make this feel like it's an actual translation of a road sign, then you have to think, oh, what do road signs do in English? What do the signs say? What's the language they use? And then the last thing is the effect. And the effect, what I'm talking about is the desired effect. The effect you're trying to have on your listener, on your reader. And here, this starts to get very complicated because if you look at that road sign and you think, okay, this is a road sign apparently for Russian troops coming into the country. That's the way I interpreted it initially. But it appeared immediately on social media, all over the place on social media. So it's not just for Russian troops. It's for other Ukrainians seeing this road sign on social media, and it's for people outside the country seeing how the Ukrainians are responding to the fact that the Russians have invaded their country. Right? So it's got a whole bunch of different functions, some of which might be for humor, in fact, or irony. And so it's not just anger. And so, again, you're trying to figure out what is the desired effect here and how are you going to render that in English and make it sing. So then you come up, you look at your arsenal of what your tools are in English, the words you've got, graphemes, signs you can use, gestures, maybe, depending on how you're translating. If you're doing ASL or if you're on the street in Italy, you might use a different gesture. And so then you think about your strategies. You can naturalize this thing, make it sound like it came out of English, or you can foreignize it a little bit in order to educate your readers, right? Because there are ways that people curse in other languages that are not the way we curse in English. And I remember long passages of For Whom the Bell Tolls where they're having these cursing contests in Spanish, right? And they're very different from the way we curse in English. And so we're much shorter and not nearly as belletristic. And so so thinking about how this strategy, are you going to naturalize it, make it feel like it came out of English, or are you going to foreignize a little bit, maybe use some kind of strange foreign sounding word? In other words, you make it easier on the reader, this is naturalizing, by finding something that's local, that's easier to understand, or you make it a little harder on the reader, so they got to kind of look more about and into the source culture and figure out what's going on. And you see this all over the place. For instance, in Bible translations, the Bible translations that were sent to Latin America, for instance, for indigenous peoples, they naturalize like crazy. In other words, they're looking for local traditions, local cultures that make sense. So if the indigenous culture doesn't have the notion of the Trinity, for instance, you find something they have that's 2 or 3 things, and you give them that, and you're not strictly formal in your translation, which is this idea, right? If you stick to the formality, it has to be this. That's making your reader kind of come into your source culture. And if you say, I'm interested in the effect primarily, and I want to convert people, I want them to become Christians, then it's dynamic and functional, right? And that's a fairly common distinction made in translation approaches. And so we go back to our sign. And so this says nahui, right here. If you're going forward, you go left, znov, which means again, nahui. It's the same expression that the guy in the recording used, idi nahui. It doesn't have the verb in here, which is go. It just has the nahui, right? Which is directional here because you can tell it's a road sign. So it's forward, you're going nahui, and going left again, nahui, and then Dorosi, which means to Russia. This is in Ukrainian. Also, nahui. It doesn't say also, it just says nahui again. Okay, so some possibilities. Now we're thinking about putting all those things together. We've got forward, right? You got that arrow going forward to hell or into hell. Which is a possibility. I've seen that as a possible translation online. Left, also to hell or also into hell. And then to hell all the way to Russia, if you're going right. Not bad. I thought the reason I like this is it's still got the directionality. It feels, it's a little bit naturalized. It feels a little, I have a coffee mug that says if you feel like you're walking through hell, keep going. right? And so we've got a lot of expressions about hell in English and passing through and going to it. And so this is pretty good. It's a little bit more naturalized than I usually would do, but it does sound pretty good. Another possibility, in deep shit, or into deep shit if you want that directionality. More deep shit, or in deep shit if you go left. And then I like this one because it's clever. To Russia and up Schitt's Creek. It's a little bit too literary, I think, and maybe a little too clever, but it's very snappy. And you could think, okay, this is a millennial putting this on a road sign, right? It's got a lot of irony, a lot of sass, and it could work as a translation. But that's not my favorite. I think my favorite is the most direct, and I'm thinking mostly about the effect and the context and the atmosphere of where this appeared and when. The broader context was the ministry. It was that very day, I think, the transportation department in Ukraine said, we're going to take all the road signs down, right? Because the Russians won't know where they're going. We have to prevent them from seeing where to go, so they have to use their own maps. And so on that very same day, this meme, this sign appeared online. And so it's part of that same strategy. And I like this. Straight, go fuck yourself. Left, go fuck yourself. And right, fuck yourself all the way back to Russia. And the reason I like it so much is because it's punch. It's the punch, right? It's angry. It's a lot like some of the things that you're seeing in other videos where somebody comes up and talks to somebody and you can see what's going on and you can tell that that's what they're saying. Right, so once we get to this this phase here, I want to think a little bit more about this expression and how, in the broader context, it sits in Ukraine today. And in order to do that, some of you know where I'm going with this. There's another expression that's very widely known, and it is Putin huilo. You'll see the root here of the same. It's the same penis, cock, dick word with a suffix added to it, and the Russian is the same, just spelled a tiny bit differently because of the E in Putin. And so you got that word hui, which is still again penis, and then they're adding this suffix lo. And now I was curious about that because it's a little bit unusual word, and I couldn't think of other examples that end in lo that were that were insulting like this. So I had to do a little bit of research, and the research suggested that the suffix is used as a sort of nominalizing suffix for tools. So you might have soap is myla from myla, and you have the lo at the end, or merilo is a measuring tool, measurement. And so then I, with the help of Maria Shardakova, she had access to a reverse dictionary. Zalesniak has a reverse dictionary. So you look at the ends of words, and it gives you a whole bunch of examples. We found more and explanations of this phenomenon. And it appears to have, yes, it comes from it's a way of designating tools. But if you add it to certain kinds of words, it also has a kind of insulting feature that is very productive for vulgarities, and not very productive. It's rather productive. So you've got rilla, which is a mug or a snout of an animal, right? So it's bestial, and then you've got murlo, which is maybe a little bit more vulgar, and it's again about a face, a person's face, which is kind of, it feels like you're comparing the person to an animal. And so an ugly mug or an ugly face. And then chamlo from the word ham, which is like impudence or insolence or being kind of, that's impudence, insolence. Those are the best ones I can come up with right now. And chamlo is just intensifies it, a really rude, vulgar person. And so that's where this huilo comes from. And so I think a good translation is something like Putin is a dickhead or a dickwad. And this has become extremely widespread. And this phrase is found all over the place, online, in graffiti, everywhere. This is the graffiti. This is a Russian version, and you can tell because of that E, right? But it's in Ukraine somewhere. I don't remember where. Putin huilo. Putin is a dickhead. This one I like especially because it's really clever. It's got a medieval vowelless feel to begin with. Then they only leave this one at the end, probably because it's stressed. Also, it's made up of stickers that are anti-Russian commodity stickers, so don't buy Russian stuff. And it's just on a fence somewhere. You've got Putin's face is the O, which is another clever one. Embroidered, an embroidery version. Again, a Russian version. These are all basically Ukrainian. They're just either in Russian language or Ukrainian language. You got a T-shirt with the nice accent stress markers. If you forget, it's stressed on the first syllable and on the last syllable of huilo. Keep calm and Putin huilo is a nice sticker. I like this one too. It's on a car in Poland, right? You can see it's in Poland. And then it has this la 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 la, which I'm going to get to here in a second. Nice Putin huilo beer, which you probably can't see from back there, but it says Putin huilo dry hopped golden ale Pravda. And then a shirtless Putin on a throne there. This was very clever. It's a Hello Kitty thing, right? Huilo Puti. with whiskers and a nice carnation in his head. And this says fashionable, youth-minded, and civic-minded, right? Державна is you're doing your civic duty. That's Julio Iglesias, I believe. You can't really quite see it at the bottom, but you can see him. J-Lo and Julio. This one I like a lot. This is Wheel of Fortune, obviously, and it says, are you going to turn the wheel, or are you ready to guess the whole phrase? And it says Chin and Lo. So you know what that says. You just got to fill in the blanks. Historical ones are also very common. This says, from time immemorial, to the Vladimirs of Kiev, they have given nicknames. So you've got Vladimir the Great, Vladimir Manimach, and Vladimir Huilo. Some of you will know this painting. It's a famous Ilya Repin painting from the 19th century. It's the Zaporizhian Cossacks writing a letter to the Sultan, right? They're saying no to the Sultan, basically. And somebody put over the top, Putin, Huilo, with again that la 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 la. And I'm going to tell you about that here now. After this one. This is a poster from, it's about Russian voting, and it's obviously a patriotic poster, probably inspired by the Second World War. And it says, citizen, vote. This is really interesting. I'm going to translate it as send Putin, and you think into office, right? But it says na, and then fill it in. Na hui, send Putin. And now think about how you translate that. It's not fucked anymore. It's a different context. It doesn't work to translate it that way. To hell is probably what we would say. And that's why I hesitate between those two when I see it on the road sign. Same with, somebody says, my Ukrainian used to be really good, but then I haven't practiced in a long time. And it went совсем нахуй. Right? People can say that, which just means it went to hell. Right, in terms of how we would express that in English. And that's probably the first one you might have thought of, right? It says Putin Huilo all over the toilet paper wrappers. This is in a store in Ukraine somewhere. Okay, so this started as a song. This is the sheet music for the song, but it didn't start as sheet music. It started, where would you expect? At a soccer stadium, right? It was Kharkiv's soccer football team, their soccer team, after the 2014 war, after the 2014 annexation, the war in the eastern part of Ukraine. There already was a song that they were singing, and they substituted after 2014 this phrase for the refrain of that song at their soccer matches. So instead of singing what they sang before, this eclipsed that, and they started singing Putin Huilo. And here it is, Putin Huilo, la 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 la, la 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 la. There aren't any other lyrics. There are no other lyrics. It's just la 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 la, right? And so now you've got la 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 as part of the message. You don't have to say Putin Huilo anymore. All you got to do is say la 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 la, like this skirt, and there's the hu, right? So you've got Putin Huilo without saying it, and just la 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 la. Now everybody knows the lyrics because it's pretty easy. It's a little like Hey Jude, right? It's the most popular Beatles song. Na 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 na. And you can use that as a logo or a graphic. And then when everybody knows the words, you don't have to say even Putin's name, but he says it once. And then everybody else is just saying la 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 la. All right. So you can also have a business card made. Putin Vladimir Vladimirovich, profession or position, Huilo, and then the. Now this is a graphic. I could have given you much more graphic graphics, but this also provides another possible translation: cockface. Right? Putin is a cockface, which sounds much more militant to me. Putin is a dickhead is kind of funny. Putin is a cockface. It needs to be punched, right? It's a person who needs to be punched. All right, so how do you tell the difference here? I mentioned that the E in the Ukrainian version makes it stick out as a Ukrainian phrase. But often, I don't know if you noticed, often this phrase is appearing in transliteration. So it's appearing in Latin letters, especially on people's clothing, probably easier to print, I don't know. And so how you might know that it's Latin letters transliterated from a Ukrainian version versus transliterated from a Russian version might be a question. I mean, you might not know. As you know, there are plenty of Russian speakers in Ukraine, and so a lot of the graffiti is in Russian, and some of the memes are in Russian, and some of the clothing items were in Russian. And it can appear in either Cyrillic or Latin script. That's the word as it is written in both Ukrainian and Russian. And if you were to go by the Library of Congress transliteration system, they would both be, the transliteration would be the same in both languages. If you go over the library looking for this word in the card catalog, we don't have that anymore. You go on, just start right here and look in your computer at the library holdings for this word. No, for any word that's Ukrainian and spelled the same way in Russian, the transliteration system is the same, except for one or two little letters, like the E, right, where the spelling is different. That's how you would do it. But, so you wouldn't know. But you understand what I'm saying? You wouldn't know whether it originated in as a Russian meme or a Ukrainian one. But there is a way to be sure in some cases. And in popular Ukrainian versions, they use an H rather than a KH. And you see that in some names as well. They're using an H instead of a ch, right, for that ch sound. It's a little confusing because in Ukrainian you could do the same for a G and an H, but in popular transliteration you'll see this. And actually for Ukrainian it seems to be, at least online, that's more common than that. And so that's one way you would be able to tell that, in fact, what you're looking at is a Ukrainian version of this insult rather than a Russian one. And I'm going to stop right there. And yes, Putin is a huilo. If there are questions about this, I'm happy to answer them. Anybody just wants to hurl expletives out, that's also fine. Everything clear? Yeah.
I have a question. One translation that I've been interested in that comes up a lot in the news is Slavo-Ukraini, right?
Yeah.
It's said at the end of a lot of speeches, of course. It's said a lot in support of Ukraine, of course. Usually translated quite literally as "Glory to Ukraine."
Yes.
And I wondered if you had thoughts on that, whether you think that's just the best translation, or whether it's more of a naturalized or foreignized translation. Because when I was thinking about it, I think it's used in a similar context to say, God Save America would be in the same context in the United States. And I wonder what your thoughts on that.
This is a great question. So in the 1980s, when the, I mean, 1980, when the Iranian students attacked the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, the phrase used there, "death to America," was translated literally. And it made them seem even more fanatical than they actually were. Because the phrase in English is "down with America." You could easily naturalize that if you wanted to, but people chose not to. In the same way, how you translate the opening salvos of the opera Boris Godunov, where they're singing Slava, Slava, Slava over and over and over again for the Tsar. And some people translate that as glory, glory, glory. But if you're talking about the Tsar, it's hail, right? Hail the Tsar, hail, hail, hail. So if you're thinking naturalization, what's the best translation? I think it's hail. And in the same way, I agree with you. If you're thinking naturalization, what's the most acceptable way that might not make people feel uncomfortable in the United States because they don't say glory to anything, would be something like long live, or something like long live. What was your other example?
So it doesn't work for Ukraine, but in the United States, it's usually "God Save America."
Yeah, God save. Yeah, so God save our troops. People use that, or long live. Something that's those are definitely more naturalized ways of translating that. Yeah.
Long live can also be "Живи."
It could be. So that's the thing. So you can, when you back translate, you can often find that the culture you're translating from has another way of saying that. That's not a reason not to naturalize it in English, just because they have more than one way. But yes, you can usually find that if you want to translate back into that language, it's not the same. You choose something else. Yeah. Yeah.
So speaking of like profanity.
Yes.
All the videos coming out of the battlefield and all of that seems to be that profanity is being used a lot and almost as if a morale boost for the Ukrainian side, at least. And the funny thing is that most of the profanity is shared between Ukrainian and Russian, right?
It's true.
So I'm sort of like curious now, is sort of like that whole vocabulary being co-opted to be a language of resistance? Is swearing in Russian political now? And like all of that. What's going to happen to Russian mod after this?
So that's sort of what I was getting at the beginning when I said in order to, you kind of have to decide who the audience is for this, and the road sign or the road sign in particular. So there's a performative aspect to it. Right? So you're showing the Russians that you do not respect them. You're kind of hurling it in their face for other Ukrainians to see, and for Westerners and people outside the country to see that that's your attitude. And so it is a rallying cry in a way. It's a point of resistance. I think that happens. I mean, I think that's a fairly common thing in crises, violent situations. People use obscenity that way. Will it change Russian mot? I kind of doubt it. It'll add another layer, particularly its use in Ukraine and maybe in other, post-Soviet realms. It's possible. I kind of suspect that has already happened to some extent in a number of places. It happened in Ukraine earlier, probably because of 2014 and yeah.
It's just I don't remember Mott being politicized during like World War II.
No, it definitely wasn't. I mean, so if you look at like official Russian representations, no way. I mean, they're absolutely prudes when it comes to how they represent the war. There's almost no cursing. Nobody curses. And they were cursing. But how they represent, the canonical representations of World War II resistance, they're very nice. And it's only more recently that you find some, a lot of mat, like in Brat or some of the more recent films. But it's not used as resistance so much. So that's a really interesting idea, that it's developed as a point of resistance. All right. I think we're done. Great, thank you.